Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Robert Huffer. He's the Eastern Regional Sales Manager for General Kinetics Corporation. He's been in the industry and with General Kinetics for the last 30 years. He'll be speaking about when to consider processing, construction, and demolition materials. Thank you. Let's welcome Robert.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. It's still half an hour till lunchtime, but 45 minutes. Just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to be here today to speak to you. Just a quick show of hands. I know there's been a lot of talk. Obviously, this conference has a heavy focus on paper and single stream and cardboard OCC materials. But quick show of hands, anybody that does any processing or considering processing in C&D, if I'm just curious if, all right, great. There's a couple hands that were raised. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I'll jump right into it. Myself, Bob Huffer, been with the company for just over 30 years, just this past month. General Kinematics as a company, we've been in business for over 65 years. Third generation owned currently and privately held. We're based in Chicago, Illinois. That's where our headquarters is. All of our engineering manufacturing is done there and supplied to basically all of North America. We do have an international presence as well, both in Europe and in Asia. That we has also additional engineering and manufacturing capacities to serve those specific areas. I'm based in Southwest Florida. So we've seen a lot in the construction demolition area. In particular, I've traveled a lot of the U.S. and seen a lot of different areas for C&D, and I would certainly say Florida is definitely one of the more concentrated areas for construction demolition, recycling materials, and those particular facilities that handle those. And I'll touch on some of that as we get into it. Again, just a little bit about General Kinematics. We are a multi-based industry company, so recycling is a fraction of our overall business. We also do quite a bit of work in the auto shredding area, so metal separation, ferrous and non-ferrous metals, waste to energy. On the backside of that, where we're recovering some of the ferrous, non-ferrous metals out of the ash material that's on the back end of that process. As well as foundry and other kind of specialized processes. So one of the unique things I think we have with some of the multi-industry coverage is that we do branch some of our technology from one industry into another, and that's allowed us to be able to take some areas that work really well into areas that we didn't think could even be a possibility or wouldn't be a possibility, and turn it into a benefit process. So overall, here to talk about why you'd consider C&D recycling. So one in particular area, C&D materials are really some of the bulkiest of the material streams that are out there, and some of the heaviest when you start talking about some of the pounds per cubic foot. What's the density of that material? So how does that impact in landfills? Well, obviously some of the biggest, bulkiest materials is some of the materials you want to keep out of the landfills. Anybody that owns or operates a landfill knows that they're trying to conserve space, conserve their airspace, and extend the life of the landfill. Especially, I'm kind of focusing here a lot in the state of Florida because that's where a lot of us are from. But in particular, the state of Florida is, I'll say, a little restrictive in terms of building of new landfills. So those landfills that are out there are very enticing to try to figure out how to extend their life, extend their airspace. So this material in particular is one that has a big impact on that because of the bulkiness of it. Also, before going to a C&D process, you certainly want to make sure it has some kind of business sense. There might be some other motivating factors between, say, a public sector versus a private sector type party, but in both cases, you really need to have it make some sense. Somewhere between what your tip rates are versus what disposal cost is. all plays a major factor, as well as some of the regional areas. And I'll touch on a point of that through the presentation. Regionally, where you're located, where's the nearest landfill, what type of collection methods are out there currently, and then the overall volume of C&D in that specific area. South Florida in particular, has been one of the fastest growing areas in all of North America. And you can see where that C&D is being generated, both on the demo side, taking down older houses to put up bigger, newer houses, or just on the new construction side, both. And that's been a growing factor in I'd say in the South Florida side. C&D in particular is, you also want to understand what other haulers are out there, what other processors that are handling that material. And finally, some of the other natural occurrences that, again, Florida is one that's had some big ones. Here most recently, Hurricane Ian, down right through the Southwest Florida area, really made a big impact. And whether you're on the private sector or whether you're on the public sector, there were facilities that were running 24/7 for over a year to just try to keep up with the handling of some of that waste materials that was being generated. So I think that those are all considerations that you're putting in your head as to why you'd want to try to make a case for processing or handling some of the C&D materials. So I apologize, it's a little dark, just the way this is showing up here, but the left side of the map was showing some of the C&D processing facilities currently in the state of Florida, and the right showing some of the C&D landfills. And one thing in particular, just to kind of point out, is the lack of landfills that are kind of in the South Florida area. And if a lot of people know that area, you've got Lake Okeechobee, which is kind of in the middle, and you've got a lot of Everglades protected areas. So there's really not a lot of areas for landfills in those areas. And the majority of that construction, and I'd say generation of a lot of this waste, is coastal, Gulf side coast versus Atlantic coast. So you can kind of see how that's represented by where those C&D facilities are located. In particular, looking at this coast and the lack of landfills and then the number of C&D facilities, most of these facilities that are running in that southeast region, I would say, are in the neighborhood of 750 to over 1,000 ton a day operations. So there's significant generation happening down in those areas. This was some data I pulled from the Department of Environmental Protection. I think actually Gene's group helped put some of this information together through SWIX. But in particular, I was just kind of focusing on some of the top 5 volumes of C&D being totally generated versus totally recycled. You can see that's kind of blowing up some of the highlighted area here, which are some significant numbers. But more importantly is kind of the recycling rates that you see over to the right. This is the percent recycled. Some of those are actually pretty impressive for the type of materials that we're dealing with. And then overall, just kind of making an overall note, 18 million tons being generated just in the state of Florida at about a 60% recovery rate, which again is actually quite impressive for that large of a scale and that many tons of a volume. And I know there's been talks over the years of where the state of Florida would like to see this number grow to. And that's definitely in the 70% range, and I know there's some goals out there that's been stated, nothing necessarily being pushed legislatively, but I think the 70% range is certainly where they want to be overall going forward. So as we start to look at and evaluate, your processing needs, and yes, I want to get into C&D processing. One of the things General Kinematics we would do is sit down with you and kind of go over your business plan. And the business plan is really looking at what some of your tip rates may be, what some of your tonnages may run at, what are some of the commodity values you may be able to get or achieve over an annual basis, and really come back with a number, a cost versus revenue number, and give you an idea where that might be. If you're processing somewhere around 200 ton a day, and change in some of your recovery rates from, say, 60% to 70%. These are all scenarios that we can sit down and work with you to help give you a better picture and really help set a budget to say what makes sense for my type of volume, my type of process, my region I'm in. And then obviously the next phase, I think, where a lot of people get frustrated is the permitting stage, which we know a lot of customers that are, we're dealing with, working with right now that are going through this, and it's a frustrating step, but obviously a necessary one. And then once you decide to move the needle and say, yeah, we're going to go ahead and process, that's where we start kind of drilling down into some of the more specific equipment needs, determining how much volume you're going to plan to process. And we don't necessarily want to focus on what's the volume you're looking for today right out of the box. We also want to say, well, what's your volume going to look like 3 to 5 years after the fact? Because the reality is a lot of this equipment, as you start to look at tonnages and volumes, your tonnage could change, could increase by 10%, could double in 3 years. I've had 2 customers here in the South Florida area. We put in projects, and literally within weeks, they've realized this needed to be twice the size that we ended up starting with. But a lot of times they don't know. A lot of guys start out in this business that are in the collections business now, running boxes and hauling boxes to landfills or transfer stations. Some of those groups are the same guys that start to look at that next step, which is processing. And the next step is actually, once you've got the boxes, once you've got the hauling, you know what your tonnages are as a hard, fast number. You know what you're going to be looking at going forward on an annual basis. You can kind of get an idea how you want to grow it or not grow it, but you can size the system just for that too. And all that makes good business sense. Obviously, the finding the location where it makes sense, closer to a landfill is always helpful. We know we have some customers that are literally on a landfill. So as their residuals come off the end of the line as some of the waste materials, they don't have to put it in a truck and haul it anywhere. They just put it in a loader and drive it up to the hill and dump it right at the landfill. I mean, that's an ideal situation. Not everybody has that luxury, but obviously it cuts down on a lot of your handling and transportation costs. We talked about the number of boxes in the trucks and some of the heavy hauling equipment, and really all this rolls up to what's a good budget, what's a good ROI for my project. And this is where it starts to kind of roll into some of the equipment. So down on the lower right-hand corner, got a couple different sets of styles of project systems, equipment that we can help provide that really helps fine-tune into certain capacity ranges. This very simple, basic sort line would be nothing, I won't say nothing, but wouldn't be more than a vibratory finger screen up front to make an initial sizing. Usually taking out some of your fines, could be 2 to 3 inch fines would come up this fines removal belt. And all your big bulky material going up to a elevated pick line. And the elevated pick line is really just to spread that material out, making that material more accessible for operators to sort through. And each one of these drop boxes along the side of this pick belt, you'd have about 6 people up on that picking platform manually doing this operation, which we've looked at the availability of trying to utilize robots over time in C&D. We just have, really, it's just not there yet in that part of technology for this type of material. But underneath the bunkers, you'd have either steel-sided bunkers, which could be handled by excavators or loaders, or you'd have roll-off boxes underneath. And that's just a picture of a small system that actually was right here in Orange County, right at the landfill for a number of years before it got taken down and moved down south. But that's a fairly small, I'd say a fairly small system running that process. So as the system requirements and the tonnage requirements for these different processes grow, the size and the footprint of these systems grow with it, and the amount of equipment gets a little larger. The heavier the material flows and the volumes requires bigger machines to help handle and process it. So This is an example of what we call an A and a B line, so it's kind of an addition to that first simple line we looked at. This just adds another whole step to the process. So here we've got a primary vibratory screen that takes the -8 material up this fines belt, goes up to a secondary screen here where we take out the minus inch and a half, which is what we call RSM here in Florida, recycled screen material. That typically goes to landfill. And then you've got your overs off this screen that go to a density separation machine, which we call a destoner, which we drop out the rock and heavy aggregate, roofing tile, things like that, the material. And the destoner is really a key piece to a lot of these C&D processes because the rock and aggregate is the heaviest commodity in your material stream for C&D. So you don't want any of that rock going back to landfill as residual because you're paying for it by the ton. So taking 99% of that rock out is really important, really critical. And then here we have just an elongated manual pick station that you can kind of see. And this, actually, I should have flipped to this sheet because it shows you a little bit more of the detail how it breaks things down throughout the process. And this is a picture actually of that same very system. You can kind of get an idea what some of that material looks like. And an interesting point here is that we do have, there's a loader that loads directly into this vibrating screen. Some people ask about utilizing a apron infeed or a lower infeed system, and we can certainly discuss those options. We don't necessarily encourage it because it's another machine. And you run a lot of your material up through say a steel pan apron, which carries a lot of the dirt and fines, which a lot of the mechanics of that chain-driven, heavy sprocketed machine doesn't necessarily like over time for maintenance purposes. But it's as long as we can elevate the excavator to load right into the machine, it works out quite well. And you can see the maintenance, or excuse me, you can see the manual picking line here with the different operators. And this line in between that you see here is actually the rock that comes off. This is our destoner that's discharging off to the side, and this is the QC belt for the rock or the aggregate. This process handles roughly about 1,000 tons a day right now. That's in the Pompano, Florida area. And then if we need to go into a bigger system, I'll say the next level, 1,000 ton a day plus, that's when we start subdividing that material stream into 3 streams now, what we call an A line, a B line, and then a secondary or tertiary C line. So really all we're doing is subdividing the fraction sizes. The A-line material is still the big bulky material, still has to be handled manually by operators and people and personnel. It's a material stream that's very unpredictable, and that's really the biggest challenge behind it. Quick story, we were in New York, Brooklyn, doing a project, and we were starting it up. Everything was running great. Material stream was as we would have thought. Next thing you know, they demoed a bowling alley down the street, and here comes about 400 bowling balls and bowling pins. And if you've ever tried to put a bowling ball up an inclined belt conveyor, it doesn't work very good. So we had the customer yelling at us for a while, but I think he finally got around to understand, obviously that's something we can't predict, but totally the nature of C&D, which is kind of interesting. So, back to this scenario. So that's where we're subdividing an 8-inch material, 8-inch plus on the A line. B line's typically handling -8 to about a 4-inch, and then the C line will take that -4 and or finer and make another cut on that. And we'll use the density separation both on the B line and the C line, taking that rock out of the material stream, because the way the density separation machine works is the finer the cut of the material that we can present to it, the more precise separation we can make on that rock versus non-aggregate, non-rock material. So that's really important. Also important to note that typically the majority of all your manual labor is here. Once you get to the B and the C line, you may have 2 or 3 people, just more of as a QC basis, but you're really utilizing or relying on your equipment to do most of those other separations in those processes. And there's a picture, actually, Southwest Florida facility of this larger scale system. You can see the primary screens here. You can see the manual pick lines. We've also got next photo will show a couple of distoners. There's the 2 density separation machines. So this would be the C line. You can even see visually see the difference in the material streams. This being the C line material, this being the B line material. Obviously smaller, finer here and larger here. And both of these 2 machines recombine into one common QC pick belt. And there's just a quick shot of the clean aggregate material that would be produced out of those 2 distoners. So just quickly focusing on some of the equipment specific, the distoners themselves come in a lot of different sizes and shapes, and it's really based on the requirements of the process. We've got some machines that we call single knife, so it's only, call it a one-cut operation with the air knives. And then some of these larger machines over to the right, they are either dual or triple air knives. And again, that just dictates the amount of volume and the amount of flow and tonnage that those machines have to process. That's how they're typically sized. And then the other primary machine, I would say, really critical, important to C&D and other processes. We've utilized the vibratory finger screens into other material streams outside of C&D. We've had some experience with MSW. We've also had some experience with some single stream material, a little limited, but some experience there. But we've also, and this photo up in the upper left there actually is a facility out in Long Island that runs C&D 2 days a week, and then C&D 2 days a week, and then MSW 3 days a week across the same machine. They're at the end of the island, so it's a little difficult for them to collection-wise. There's not a lot of processing availability there, so that's why they do the dual stream across kind of a common process. These are some of the larger vibratory screens that were set up. Again, this was for South Florida. Processing MSW. There's 1 apron conveyor, actually 2 apron conveyors that feed each of the 2 machines. Each of those 2 machines process roughly about 50 ton an hour. And that's making the initial larger cut and keeping some of the bagged waste up over the top of the deck and taking some of the finer MSW down to the lower deck, which is processed on a secondary screening process. This just talks about some of the other quick image of, again, a couple more of the vibratory finger screens, and the image over here on the left shows some of the other styles that we use, which is a little bit more of a rod deck for some of the other finer cut materials that we can go to less than 1 inch if we need to in some of the other material streams. So that kind of wraps up what I had on the C&D side. My contact information is there at the bottom of the slide. You're welcome to take that. Myself and my colleague Alan, we've got a booth here next door, so if you had any questions or want to discuss anything that you have that's going on, we'd be welcome to do that. Appreciate your time.